The dust cloud rising from the train station platform carried whispers of scandal that would shake Independence, Missouri, to its foundations. And when Martha Jane Daniels stepped off the westbound express in her pale blue traveling dress, she had no idea another woman wearing white lace had arrived on the eastbound train just minutes before, both clutching letters from the same cowboy named Jack Franklin. The summer of 1878 brought sweltering heat to the Missouri plains, and Martha fanned herself with the folded correspondence that had changed her life 3 months earlier. She was 21 years old, with auburn hair pinned carefully beneath a modest bonnet, and green eyes that held both determination and uncertainty. The letter had come to her boarding house in Boston, written in careful script by a man seeking a wife, a man who described himself as a rancher with 300 acres and a heart ready to settle down. They had exchanged 6 letters over 12 weeks, each one revealing more of themselves, and Martha had sold nearly everything she owned to purchase the train ticket west. She scanned the platform for the man whose photograph she carried in her reticule, but instead her gaze landed on something peculiar. Another young woman stood near the station house, also searching the crowd, also clutching what appeared to be letters. This woman was perhaps 23, dressed in an elaborate white lace dress better suited for a wedding than travel, with golden blonde hair arranged in perfect curls. Her blue eyes were bright with excitement, and her entire bearing spoke of wealth and privilege. Martha felt a flutter of unease but dismissed it. Independence was a growing town, a jumping-off point for westward expansion, and plenty of people arrived daily with various purposes. "Miss Daniels," a gruff voice interrupted her thoughts. She turned to find a weathered man in his 50s, wearing dusty work clothes and a concerned expression that immediately put her on guard. "Yes, I am Martha Daniels. Are you Mr. Franklin?" The man removed his hat and twisted it between his hands. "No, miss. Name is Henry Cooper. I work for Jack Franklin. He asked me to meet you here and bring you out to the ranch. Got his wagon right over there." Martha's unease deepened. "He did not come himself." "Well, miss, that is a complicated situation." Henry glanced toward the other woman on the platform, and Martha followed his gaze just as another ranch hand approached the blonde woman. "Miss Victoria Duncan," the second man was saying. The blonde woman brightened. "Yes, that is me. Has Mr. Franklin sent you?" "I have traveled all the way from Philadelphia to meet my intended husband." The words hit Martha like a physical blow. She watched as the color drained from the other woman's face too, both of them understanding simultaneously that something had gone terribly, impossibly wrong. Henry cleared his throat. "Ladies, perhaps we should discuss this at the ranch. Jack can explain everything." "Explain what exactly?" Victoria Duncan's voice had gone sharp, aristocratic breeding mixing with rising anger. "Are you suggesting that this man proposed marriage to both of us?" Martha found her voice, though it shook slightly. "I have 6 letters from Jack Franklin, each one more personal than the last. He asked me to come west and marry him. He sent money for the train ticket." "He sent me money as well," Victoria said, her face flushing. "And I have 8 letters. He wrote about his ranch, his hopes for the future, his desire for a family." The two women stared at each other, and Martha saw her own shock and hurt reflected in the stranger's eyes. Then Victoria's expression hardened. "Well, clearly there has been some mistake. I am certain when Jack sees me, he will understand that I am the appropriate choice. My family owns Duncan Textiles. I can bring significant resources to a marriage." Martha bristled at the implication. "I may not have money, but I can run a household, keep accounts, and work alongside anyone." "I did not come here to be bought." "Ladies, please," Henry interjected, looking miserable. "Let us get you both to the ranch. Jack is expecting you, and he will sort this out proper-like." The wagon ride through Independence was tense and silent. Martha sat on one side, Victoria on the other, neither looking at each other as the town gave way to open prairie. The land stretched endlessly in all directions, golden grass rippling in waves beneath the brutal sun. Martha had never seen such vast emptiness, having spent her whole life in Boston's crowded streets. It was both beautiful and terrifying. The Franklin Ranch came into view after an hour's drive. The main house was a solid two-story structure built from local timber, surrounded by corrals, a barn, and several outbuildings. Cattle grazed in distant pastures, and the whole operation spoke of success and hard work. A man emerged from the house as the wagon approached, and Martha's heart stuttered. Even from a distance, she recognized him from the photograph. Jack Franklin was tall and broad-shouldered, with dark hair that needed cutting and a strong jaw shadowed with stubble. He wore working clothes, jeans and a worn shirt with sleeves rolled to reveal tanned forearms. He was perhaps 28 or 29, and as he came closer, Martha could see the stark panic in his brown eyes. "Henry, what in the hell is going on?" Jack's voice was deep, carrying across the yard as the wagon stopped. "Both ladies arrived, Jack. Both of them." Jack went pale. He looked from Martha to Victoria and back again, and Martha watched him swallow hard. Victoria descended from the wagon with practiced grace, despite the awkward situation. "Mr. Franklin, I am Victoria Duncan. We have been corresponding for 3 months. You invited me here to become your wife." Martha climbed down more slowly, her legs shaky from travel and emotion. "I am Martha Daniels. You wrote to me as well with the same promises." Jack removed his hat and ran a hand through his hair, a gesture of pure distress. "I can explain. Please, both of you, come inside. You deserve the truth." The house interior was surprisingly well maintained, with sturdy furniture and clean floors, though it clearly lacked a woman's touch. Jack led them to a sitting room and gestured for them to take seats. Victoria perched on the edge of a chair, spine straight, while Martha sank onto a settee, exhausted from travel and emotional upheaval. Jack remained standing, unable to meet either woman's eyes. "I owe you both an apology and an explanation. The truth is, I did write to both of you." "And several other women besides." Victoria gasped. "Several. I never expected all of you to respond, let alone agree to come," Jack said miserably. "I put advertisements in newspapers back east, hoping maybe one woman would be interested in a life out here. When I started getting responses, I wrote back to all of them. The letters became more frequent, more personal, and I got caught up in the correspondence. Each of you seemed perfect in different ways, and I kept thinking I would choose eventually, but I never did." Martha felt her cheeks burning with humiliation. "So we were what, exactly? Applicants for a position?" "No, it was not like that," Jack protested. "Everything I wrote was true. My feelings were genuine. I just could not decide, and then suddenly you were both arriving on the same day, and I realized what a terrible mistake I had made." "This is unconscionable," Victoria said, her voice icy. "I left my entire life behind. My family was horrified that I would marry someone they considered beneath our station, but I believed in the future you described. I believed you cared for me. I did. I do." Jack looked desperate. "Both of you are remarkable women. That was my problem. How could I choose between you based on letters alone?" "So what exactly do you propose now?" Martha asked, fighting to keep her voice steady. "That we compete for your affection like horses at auction," Jack flinched. "I would never put it that way. But I was hoping, perhaps, if you both stayed for a while, we could get to know each other properly." Then I could make a fair choice, and the woman I do not choose could return home with her expenses paid and my sincerest apologies." Victoria stood abruptly. "I did not travel 1,500 miles to participate in some grotesque competition. If you cannot recognize immediately that I am the suitable choice, then you are not the man I believed you to be. And I did not sell everything I own to be compared and judged," Martha added, though she remained seated. "But I also do not have the means to simply go back to Boston. I gave up my position at the boarding house. I have nowhere to return to." The admission cost her pride, but it was the truth. She had gambled everything on this new life, and now she was stranded 1,500 miles from anything familiar. Jack's expression shifted to guilt. "I am sorry. Truly I am. I will make this right somehow. Both of you are welcome to stay here as long as you need. I have 2 spare bedrooms upstairs. You will be treated as honored guests, and when you are ready to leave, I will ensure you have the funds to start fresh wherever you choose." "How generous," Victoria said sarcastically. "Though I notice you still hold out hope that one of us will agree to marry you despite this disaster." "I do not deserve either of you," Jack admitted. "But yes, I still hope. I need a wife, and I genuinely cared for both of you through our letters. Maybe that makes me a fool or a scoundrel, but it is the truth." Martha studied him carefully. He seemed genuinely distressed, not cavalier about the situation. His letters had been thoughtful and kind, revealing a man who worked hard but was lonely, who wanted partnership and family. That man did not quite match with someone who would carelessly invite multiple women to marry him simultaneously. "Were there others?" she asked. "You said several women. Did anyone else arrive?" Jack shook his head. "3 others wrote back saying they were coming, but I sent them telegrams last week telling them not to. I thought I could at least narrow it down to you 2 before anyone arrived. I was wrong about the timing." "Why us?" Victoria asked, her anger cooling slightly into curiosity. "If you had to choose 2 women to actually meet, why Martha and me?" Jack finally met their eyes. Martha's letters were intelligent and warm. She wrote about books she had read, ideas she had about modern farming techniques, her practical skills. She seemed like someone who could build a real partnership out here. And Victoria, your letters were elegant and full of spirit. You wrote about wanting adventure, about feeling constrained by society's expectations, about dreaming of a bigger life. You both seemed perfect, just in different ways. Martha felt her anger wavering slightly. She understood loneliness, understood the desperation that came from wanting connection. She had felt it herself when she had first read Jack's advertisement, seen it as an escape from her limited prospects in Boston. But that did not excuse what he had done. "I need time to think," she said finally, "and a place to wash up and rest. The journey was long." "Of course," Jack said quickly. "Henry's wife, Ruth, is our housekeeper. She is in town today, but she will be back this evening and can help you get settled. For now, let me show you the rooms." He led them upstairs to 2 modest but clean bedrooms, each furnished with a simple bed, dresser, and washstand. Martha's room had a window overlooking the prairie, and she stood there after Jack left, staring out at the endless horizon. She had traveled so far, hoped for so much, and now everything was in chaos. A knock at the door interrupted her thoughts. She opened it to find Victoria standing in the hallway, her earlier confidence visibly shaken. "May I speak with you?" Victoria asked. Martha gestured her inside, and Victoria sat on the edge of the bed, her elaborate lace dress incongruous in the simple room. "I wanted to apologize," Victoria said. "Not for coming here because I had every right, but for what I said about being the appropriate choice. That was unkind." Martha sat beside her. "We are both upset, I understand. The truth is, I was terrified that you might actually be better suited for this life than me, Victoria admitted. You seem so capable and practical. I have never worked a day in my life. I do not know the first thing about ranching or household management beyond directing servants. I just wanted something different than the life my parents had planned for me. What life was that? Marriage to Edmund Whitmore, heir to a banking fortune. He is 43, dull as dishwater, and already has a mistress he has no intention of giving up. My parents think it is a brilliant match because it will merge our family's business interests. Victoria's voice was bitter. When I saw Jack's advertisement, it felt like a door opening. A chance to choose my own path. Martha felt unexpected sympathy. I understand wanting escape. My prospects in Boston were bleak. I was working as a companion to an elderly woman who treated me barely better than a servant. When she died, I had nothing. Jack's letters offered hope. "What do we do now?" Victoria asked. "I honestly do not know. Part of me wants to leave on the next train, but I meant what I said. I have nothing to go back to. I need time to figure out my next step. My parents would take me back, but I would be right back in the same cage," Victoria said quietly. "Maybe we are both fools for not just leaving." "Maybe," Martha agreed. "Or maybe we deserve to at least see what might have been before we give up entirely." Over the next few days, an uneasy routine developed at the Franklin Ranch. Ruth Cooper, Henry's wife, turned out to be a kind woman in her 40s who took both unexpected guests under her wing without judgment. She taught Martha the rhythms of the household and tried gamely to interest Victoria in domestic tasks, though the Philadelphia heiress struggled with even basic cooking. Jack gave them space, working long hours with his cattle and only appearing at mealtimes. Martha noticed he was careful to divide his attention equally between them, asking about their comfort, their needs, never favoring one over the other. It would have been almost comical if the situation were not so painful. Martha found herself drawn to the ranch despite everything. She woke early to help Ruth with breakfast, learning to cook on the massive iron stove. She explored the property, fascinated by the cattle operation, the vast sky, the way the land seemed to breathe with possibility. This was so different from Boston's cramped streets, and part of her heart was already falling in love with Missouri. Victoria, meanwhile, struggled. She was not accustomed to heat, to physical labor, to the isolation. Martha would find her standing on the porch, staring toward independence as if willing civilization to appear. Yet Victoria did not leave. When Martha asked why, Victoria simply said she was not ready to admit defeat. A week after their arrival, Jack approached Martha in the barn where she was learning about the horses from Henry. "Can we talk?" he asked. Henry made himself scarce, and Martha turned to face Jack, her guard up. "I owe you more than an apology," Jack said. "I have been thinking about what I did, how unfair it was. You were right to be angry." "I am still angry," Martha said, "but I am also trying to understand. What possessed you to handle things this way?" Jack leaned against a stall door, his expression troubled. "Loneliness, I suppose. And cowardice. I have been alone here for 3 years, ever since I bought this land. I built everything you see, worked myself half to death getting the ranch established. But at the end of every day, the house was empty. I wanted a partner, someone to share this with. When women started responding to my advertisement, it felt like a miracle. I could not bear to reject any of you, so I kept writing, kept hoping somehow the right choice would become obvious. Instead, you created a disaster. I know." He met her eyes. "If I could take it back, I would. But I cannot. All I can do is try to make it right going forward." Martha considered him carefully. In his letters, Jack had seemed thoughtful and honest. In person, she saw those same qualities, along with deep regret. He had made a terrible mistake, but she believed it came from desperation rather than malice. "What do you want, Jack, truly?" "I want what I wrote to you about. A wife, a partner, children someday. A real home, not just a house. I want someone who understands this life and chooses it freely. I want love, Martha, not just convenience." The way he said her name sent an unexpected warmth through her. "You barely know me." "I know you better than you think. Your letters revealed your heart. You are curious and brave. You see possibilities instead of limitations. When you write about ideas, you light up even through ink on paper. I admired that. I still do." "You wrote similar things to Victoria." "I did," Jack admitted, "because I admired different things about her. Her determination to escape expectations, her willingness to take enormous risks for freedom. She could have stayed in luxury and chose potential hardship instead. That takes real courage." Martha felt a twist of jealousy she had no right to feel. "So we are back to you being unable to choose." "No," Jack said quietly. "We are at me realizing I should not be choosing at all. You and Victoria should be choosing. This is your life, your future. You should decide what you want, not compete for my approval." "That is a pretty sentiment, but the situation remains the same. You can only marry one of us." "True. But maybe you should be the ones deciding if I am even worth marrying. Maybe you should take your time, get to know me and this place, and then tell me what you want. No pressure, no competition, just honest consideration." It was not a perfect solution, but it was better than the alternative. Martha nodded slowly. "I can agree to that, but I cannot speak for Victoria. I will talk to her as well. And Martha, I am sorry for all of it." She believed him, which somehow made everything more complicated. That evening, Victoria sought Martha out in her room. The blonde woman looked troubled but determined. "Jack spoke with you today," Victoria said. "He came to me as well, about taking our time to decide." "What do you think?" Martha asked. Victoria sat on the window seat, backlit by the setting sun. "I think he is trying to be honorable about a dishonorable situation. I also think he has no idea what he wants, which means this could drag on indefinitely." "So you are leaving?" "I did not say that." Victoria twisted her hands together. "The truth is, I do not want to go back. I know I am terrible at everything here. I burned breakfast twice this week. I cannot tell one cow from another, and this heat makes me want to die. But even so, there is something here I cannot name. A feeling of possibility maybe, or just stubbornness." Martha laughed despite herself. "I understand that. Do you like him?" Victoria asked bluntly. "Jack, I mean, are you developing feelings?" The question caught Martha off guard. "I do not know him well enough to say. But I do not dislike him, and I could see myself building a life here, regardless of whether that includes Jack or not." "What does that mean?" "It means I am starting to love this place. The land, the freedom, the potential. Boston feels like a lifetime ago. Even if Jack chooses you or neither of us, I think I might want to stay in Missouri, find my own way somehow." Victoria looked surprised. "I had not thought of that possibility, that we might choose the place over the man. Can you see yourself doing that, honestly?" "No. I appreciate the beauty here, but I am a creature of cities and society. If I do not marry Jack, I will likely go back east, just maybe not to Philadelphia. Somewhere I can make my own choices." They sat in companionable silence for a moment, the rivalry between them easing into something like friendship. "We should make a pact," Victoria said suddenly. "No matter what happens with Jack, we do not let it destroy our decency toward each other. We have both been manipulated by this situation. We should not turn on each other." Martha extended her hand, and Victoria shook it firmly. "Agreed." The next weeks passed in a strange rhythm. Martha threw herself into ranch life, learning everything she could from Ruth and Henry. She discovered she had a knack for managing accounts, and began helping Jack organize his business records, which were in chaos. She also learned to ride, though her first attempts ended in bruises and laughter. Jack taught her himself, patient and encouraging, and Martha found herself looking forward to those lessons more than she wanted to admit. Victoria surprised everyone by befriending several women in Independence, accompanying Ruth on her trips to town, and charming the local society with her sophistication. She organized a church social that raised funds for a new schoolhouse and became a fixture at the general store, where her fashion sense caused quite a stir. Victoria might not know how to cook, but she knew how to navigate social structures, and she used those skills to carve out a place for herself. Both women spent time with Jack, sometimes together, sometimes separately. He took them on rides across his property, showed them the plans he had for expansion, asked their opinions on everything from cattle breeding to house renovations. Martha found him easy to talk to, their conversations ranging from practical matters to philosophy to dreams for the future. With Victoria, Jack seemed more carefully polite, as if uncertain how to bridge the class difference between them. A month after their arrival, Independence held its annual summer dance. Jack asked both women to attend, and after some negotiation, they agreed to go as a group rather than forcing him to choose a single partner. The dance was held in a large barn on the outskirts of town, decorated with lanterns and wildflowers. It seemed half of Missouri had turned out, ranchers and townspeople mingling in their best clothes. Martha wore a simple green dress that Ruth had helped her make, while Victoria appeared in a stunning blue gown she had brought from Philadelphia. Jack looked uncomfortable in a formal suit, tugging at his collar as they entered. "I should warn you I am not much of a dancer." "Neither am I," Martha admitted. "Well, I am," Victoria said with a grin, "so at least one of us will know what we are doing." The evening began awkwardly, with people openly staring at the unusual trio. Gossip had spread through Independence about Jack's mail-order bride situation, and the townspeople were endlessly curious. But as the music started and people began dancing, the tension eased. Jack danced first with Victoria, and Martha watched them move across the floor. Victoria was graceful and confident, leading when Jack faltered, and they made a striking couple. Martha felt a pang of jealousy that surprised her with its intensity. She had been trying not to examine her feelings too closely, but watching Jack smile at Victoria made something in her chest ache. "They look good together," a voice said beside her. Martha turned to find a young man about her age, with sandy hair and kind gray eyes. He wore working clothes that marked him as a rancher. "They do," Martha agreed carefully. "I am James Garrett. My family has the ranch west of the Franklin place. You must be Miss Daniels." "Martha, please." "Yes, I am staying with the Franklins." James grinned. Everyone in 3 counties knows about the situation. Scandal of the decade. But for what it is worth, I think Jack is an idiot. Despite herself, Martha laughed. "Why is that?" "Because any man who cannot choose between 2 beautiful women probably does not deserve either of them." "Would you like to dance?" Martha hesitated, then accepted his offered hand. James was a competent dancer and easy company. As they moved through the steps, he told her about his family's ranch, his plans to expand into horse breeding, his love of this wild country. Martha found herself relaxing, enjoying the music and conversation. When the dance ended, Jack was suddenly at her elbow. "I believe this next one is mine," he said, his tone tight. James yielded gracefully, and Jack swept Martha into a waltz. He was tense, his hand rigid on her waist. "You seem to be enjoying yourself," he said. "I was. James is pleasant company. He has a reputation as quite the charmer." Martha raised an eyebrow. "Are you warning me off him?" I have no right to do that, Jack admitted. But yes, I suppose I am. You invited me here to potentially marry you, then left the decision hanging for a month while you consider your options. I think I am entitled to dance with whoever I please. Jack's jaw tightened, but he nodded. You are right. I apologize. I just did not expect to feel so damn jealous watching you with him. The admission hung between them as they moved through the dance. Martha's heart was beating too fast, and she could not tell if it was from the exertion or Jack's proximity. He smelled like soap and leather, and his hand was warm and strong around hers. Jack, she said softly, what are we doing? This situation cannot continue forever. I know. I have been a coward about making a decision. The truth is, both of you have become important to me, but in different ways. That is not an answer. No, it is not, he agreed, his brown eyes meeting hers. But I am working toward one, I promise. The dance ended and Jack released her reluctantly. The rest of the evening passed in a blur of music and conversation. Martha danced with James twice more and with several other local men who were curious about the newcomer. Victoria held court among the town's ladies, regaling them with stories of Philadelphia society. Jack divided his time between both women, but Martha noticed his gaze followed her whenever she danced with James. On the wagon ride home, Victoria was exhilarated from the social success, chattering about the people she had met and the invitations she had received. Martha was quieter, thinking about Jack's words and her own confused feelings. That James Garrett seems taken with you, Victoria observed. He barely looked at anyone else all night. He was just being friendly, Martha said. He was being interested, Victoria corrected. And honestly, why should you not encourage him? He seems nice enough, and he is not stringing along multiple women simultaneously. Jack's hands tightened on the reins, but he said nothing. The next morning, Martha was working in the kitchen garden Ruth had planted when James Garrett rode up to the house. He dismounted and approached with an easy smile. I enjoyed our dances last night, he said. I was hoping you might have time for a ride. I would like to show you some of the country around here. Martha hesitated, aware of Jack watching from the barn. Then she made a decision. That sounds lovely. Let me change into riding clothes. 20 minutes later, she and James were riding across the prairie, the morning sun warm on their shoulders. James was an entertaining companion, pointing out landmarks and telling stories about the area's history. He asked about her life in Boston, her journey west, her impressions of Missouri. Unlike the situation with Jack, there was no pressure, no complicated history. Just easy conversation and open possibility. They stopped by a creek to rest the horses, and James helped her dismount. His hands lingered on her waist perhaps a moment longer than necessary. I should be honest with you, he said. Everyone knows you are staying at the Franklin Ranch because of the mail-order bride situation. I do not care about that. I think you are remarkable, and I would like to court you properly if you would allow it. Martha was taken aback. James, I barely know you. Then let me fix that. No games, no competition. Just you and me getting to know each other. What do you say? It was tempting. James represented a clean slate, uncomplicated affection. But Martha found herself thinking of Jack, of the partnership they had been building through their work on the ranch, of the way her heart had raced during their dance. I need time, she said finally. The situation at the Franklin Ranch is unresolved, and I owe it to myself to see it through before I consider other options. But I appreciate your interest, truly. James looked disappointed but nodded. I understand, but when you are ready, I hope you will think of me. When Martha returned to the ranch, Jack was waiting on the porch, his expression stormy. Where have you been? He demanded, riding with James. He wanted to show me the area. Did he? Jack's voice was flat. And what else did he want to show you? Martha's temper flared. That is none of your business unless you are prepared to make a decision about our situation. You do not get to keep me in limbo while also controlling who I spend time with. You are right, Jack said, standing abruptly. You are absolutely right. I have been unfair and indecisive, and I am done with that. Martha, I need to talk to you and Victoria together. Tonight, after dinner, it is time I stopped being a coward. Martha's stomach dropped. What are you saying? I am saying I am making my choice. Both of you deserve to know where you stand. The day crawled by with agonizing slowness. Martha tried to work in the garden to help Ruth with household tasks, but her mind was spinning. Jack was finally making his decision. By tonight, everything would be resolved. She would either become engaged to marry him, or she would need to figure out what came next with her life. Victoria appeared equally nervous, spending the afternoon in her room, emerging only for the silent, tense dinner. Jack barely touched his food, his jaw set with determination. Ruth and Henry excused themselves quickly, sensing the coming storm. Jack led Martha and Victoria into the sitting room. All three of them sat, the air heavy with anticipation. I have thought about this constantly, Jack began. Both of you are exceptional women. Victoria, you are elegant, clever, and brave enough to completely remake your life. Martha, you are practical, warm, and you have taken to this ranch like you were born to it. I could build a good life with either of you. But, Victoria prompted, her voice steady despite the pallor of her face. But I have realized that a good life is not enough. I want a partnership built on genuine love, not just compatibility. He turned to Victoria. You and I are not in love. We admire each other, we could be friends, but there is no spark between us. You know it as well as I do. Victoria was quiet for a moment, then nodded slowly. You are right. I have been telling myself that love could grow, but in truth, I think I fell in love with the idea of escape more than with you specifically. I am sorry, Jack said sincerely. Do not be. You are being honest, which is more than you were when this started. Victoria stood with her characteristic grace. I assume you are choosing Martha then. Jack turned to Martha, and she saw something in his eyes that made her breath catch. But before he could speak, she held up her hand. Wait, Martha said. Before you say anything, I need to speak. Jack looked surprised but nodded. Martha stood, her heart pounding. When I arrived here, I was angry and humiliated. I felt like a fool for believing in the possibility of love with a stranger. But over these past weeks, I have learned something important. I did not fall in love with Jack Franklin through letters. I fell in love with the possibility of a different life, of freedom and purpose. The same thing Victoria felt. Martha, Jack started, but she continued. Let me finish. These past weeks, I have grown to care for you. I admire your work ethic, your kindness, your determination. But I have also realized that I do not need you to have the life I want. I can build that myself. And I should not marry someone because it is convenient or because I have nowhere else to go. I should marry for love, real love, the kind that is worth the risk. What are you saying? Jack asked quietly. I am saying I am not in love with you either. Not yet. Maybe I could be given more time, but that is not a good enough reason to get married. We both deserve more than that. The room was silent. Victoria was staring at Martha with something like awe. Jack looked stunned. So neither of you want to marry me, he said finally, a strange note in his voice. I did not say that exactly, Martha clarified. I said I should not marry you for the wrong reasons. If you want to court me properly, with no obligations or pressure, I would be open to that. But I would also be open to seeing what might develop with James Garrett, or with someone else I have not met yet. I am staying in Missouri, Jack, but I am not staying in limbo. Jack ran his hand through his hair. the gesture she had come to recognize as his sign of deep thought. Then, slowly, he began to laugh. It was a genuine, surprised laugh. "I have been so focused on choosing between you that I never considered you might not choose me," he said. "I suppose I deserved that." "You did," Victoria agreed, but she was smiling too. "Though I have to say this is not how I expected this evening to go." "What will you do?" Martha asked Victoria. Victoria considered for a moment. "I am going back east, but not to Philadelphia. I have been corresponding with a friend in New York. She runs a women's club focused on education and reform. She thinks I could help with their fundraising and social events. It sounds perfect for my particular skills." "That does sound perfect," Martha said warmly. "And you?" Victoria asked. "Beyond staying in Missouri, what is your plan?" "I honestly do not know yet, but I will figure it out." Jack cleared his throat. "For what it is worth, I would very much like to court you properly, Martha. No pressure, no expectations. Just a chance to see if what we have could grow into something real." Martha met his eyes. "I would like that too. But I am also going to accept James's invitation to spend time together. I want to make my choice freely, with full knowledge of my options." Jack's jaw tightened, but he nodded. "That is fair. I do not like it, but it is fair." The next week brought significant changes. Victoria began preparing for her departure, sorting through her belongings and writing letters to her friend in New York. She had found her purpose, and it showed in her renewed energy and excitement. James Garrett became a frequent visitor to the Franklin Ranch, arriving with flowers or small gifts, always asking politely if Martha had time for a ride or a walk. He was charming and attentive, and Martha enjoyed his company. But she found herself comparing every conversation with James to her talks with Jack, and James consistently came up short. He was nice, but there was no depth, no challenge. With Jack, every discussion pushed her thinking, made her consider new angles, sparked something in her mind and heart. Jack, true to his word, courted Martha with deliberate care. He brought her books from Independence, knowing her love of reading. He asked her opinions on ranch decisions and actually implemented her suggestions. He taught her to shoot, to handle a lasso, to read the weather in the prairie sky. And slowly, carefully, they began to open up to each other in ways their letters had never achieved. One evening, they sat on the porch watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and purple. Victoria had retired early and they were alone. "Tell me something true," Martha said. "Something you have never told anyone." Jack was quiet for a long moment. "I came west because I was running from something. My father wanted me to take over his dry goods store in Ohio. It was a good business, steady income, but the thought of spending my life behind a counter made me want to scream. We fought about it for years. When he died, my mother expected me to finally settle down and run the store. Instead, I sold everything and came here. She has not forgiven me." "Do you regret it?" "Never. But I regret the pain it caused her. I write to her every month and she never writes back." He turned to Martha. "Your turn. Tell me something true." Martha pulled her shawl tighter against the evening chill. "I was engaged once in Boston to a clerk named Thomas. He was respectable and appropriate, and I thought I loved him. Then I discovered he was engaged to another woman as well, someone with better prospects. He was keeping me as a backup in case the other match fell through." "That is why you were so angry about my letters," Jack realized, partly. "But also because I saw myself making the same mistake again, believing in pretty words without substance. Except this time I had given up everything, not just my pride. I am sorry. Do not be. It brought me here to this." She gestured at the vast prairie, the endless sky. "I have never felt as alive as I do in this place." Jack reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away. When she did not, he took her hand. His palm was rough with calluses, warm and solid. "I am falling in love with you," he said quietly. "I do not know if that is what you want to hear, but it is the truth. Not the woman in the letters, but you. The real you who burns breakfast sometimes, who argues with me about cattle management, who laughs when she falls off a horse. You." Martha's heart was racing. "Jack, I know you are seeing James. I know I have no right to ask you to stop. But I am asking anyway because every time he comes here, I want to throw him off my property. That is how I know this is real. I have never been jealous before in my life." Before Martha could respond, the sound of hoofbeats interrupted them. They turned to see a rider approaching fast, and as he came closer, Martha recognized one of James's ranch hands. "Miss Daniels," the young man called, barely waiting for his horse to stop. "You need to come quick. James went out to check on our northern fence line and his horse came back without him. We think he might be hurt." Martha stood immediately. "How long ago?" 2 hours. "We have been searching, but it is getting dark." Jack was already moving. "I will get the lanterns and medical supplies. Henry can organize a search party." Within 20 minutes, a group of men from neighboring ranches had assembled, including Jack, Henry, and several others who had heard the commotion. Martha insisted on coming despite Jack's protests. "He asked me to court him," she said firmly. "I am not going to sit here doing nothing while he might be injured." They rode out into the gathering darkness, spreading out in a line to cover more ground. Martha stayed close to Jack, her lantern casting strange shadows across the prairie grass. The night was full of sounds that were unfamiliar and slightly frightening. "There!" someone shouted. "I found him." They converged on the spot to find James lying near a dry creek bed, conscious but clearly in pain. His leg was bent at an unnatural angle. "Damn horse spooked at a rattlesnake," James said through gritted teeth. "Threw me right into these rocks." Jack knelt beside him, his movements careful and competent. "Broken leg, definitely. We need to splint it before we move you." Working together, the men constructed a rough splint and stretcher. The journey back to the Garrett ranch was slow and careful, James biting back groans with every jolt. Martha rode alongside the stretcher, offering what comfort she could. At the Garrett ranch, the local doctor was summoned. He confirmed the break was bad and would require weeks of immobilization and careful recovery. James would be essentially bedridden for at least a month. As dawn broke, Martha and Jack finally headed back to the Franklin ranch. They were both exhausted, covered in dust and sweat. "Thank you for helping," Martha said as they rode. "Of course, James might be my rival, but I would never leave a man to suffer." Jack glanced at her. "You care about him." "I care about any human being in pain. But Jack, that is not the same as being in love with him." "No, no." Martha took a breath. "Tonight when we got word he was hurt, I was worried. But riding beside you, watching you take charge and help him, all I could think was how glad I was that you were there. Not James. You." Jack pulled his horse to a stop and Martha did the same. In the early morning light, his face was shadowed with exhaustion and something else. "What are you saying, Martha?" "I am saying you were right. I am falling in love with you too. The real you, not the man in the letters. The one who is stubborn and hardworking and sometimes infuriating. The one who made a terrible mistake but has been trying to fix it every day since. That is the man I want." Jack dismounted in one fluid motion and reached up to help her down. When her feet hit the ground, he did not let go. His hands framed her face gently, and Martha saw everything she needed to in his eyes before he kissed her. The kiss was soft at first, questioning, then deepened as Martha wrapped her arms around his neck and answered with every bit of feeling she had been holding back. He tasted like dust and coffee and something uniquely Jack. When they finally broke apart, both were breathless. "Marry me," Jack said. "Not because you have nowhere else to go, not because it is convenient. Marry me because we choose each other freely and completely." "Yes," Martha said, then laughed at the joy on his face. "But we are doing this properly. A real engagement, time for planning, none of this rushed nonsense." "Anything you want," Jack promised, kissing her again. They rode the rest of the way home hand in hand, exhausted but happy. Ruth took one look at them and smiled knowingly, shooing them off to rest. Martha woke hours later to find Victoria sitting on the edge of her bed. "Ruth told me about James," Victoria said. "Is he all right?" "He will recover. It will take time." "And Jack, did something happen between you two?" Martha could not suppress her smile. "We are engaged." Victoria's face lit up. "Finally! I was wondering how long it would take you both to admit what was obvious to everyone else." "Was it that obvious?" "Painfully so. The way you look at each other, the way you work together. It is like watching two halves of a whole finally figure out they fit together." Victoria hugged her. "I am happy for you, truly." Over the next weeks, preparations began in earnest. Victoria delayed her departure to help with wedding planning, throwing herself into the project with characteristic enthusiasm. She and Martha became genuine friends, their shared experience creating a bond neither had expected. James recovered slowly, and Martha visited him several times, ensuring there were no hard feelings. He took the news of her engagement with good grace, admitting he had seen it coming. "Franklin is a lucky man," James said, "and you are happy, which is what matters." The wedding was set for early September, when the worst of the summer heat had passed. Martha wrote to her few remaining contacts in Boston, inviting them west, though she knew most would not come. Jack wrote to his mother, hoping against hope she might relent. 3 days before the wedding, a woman stepped off the Independence train, carrying a small valise and wearing a determined expression. She looked like an older version of Jack, with the same strong jaw and brown eyes. Jack was in town picking up supplies when he saw her. He stopped dead in the street, his packages forgotten. Mother, Eleanor Franklin, approached her son slowly. "I received your letter about the wedding. I thought it was time to stop being stubborn." Jack embraced her, and Martha saw the tears on both their faces when Eleanor arrived at the ranch an hour later. Mother and son talked late into the night, years of hurt and misunderstanding finally beginning to heal. The wedding day dawned clear and beautiful, the September sky a brilliant blue. The ceremony was held at the church in Independence, which was packed with ranchers, townspeople, and new friends. Victoria stood as Martha's bridesmaid, elegant in lavender silk. Henry served as Jack's best man, beaming with pride. Martha wore a simple white dress that Ruth had helped her sew, with wildflowers in her hair. As she walked down the aisle, she saw Jack waiting at the altar, looking both terrified and ecstatic in his formal suit. His mother sat in the front pew, dabbing at her eyes with a handkerchief. The vows were traditional, but when Jack promised to love and cherish Martha, his voice broke with emotion. When Martha promised the same, she meant every word with her whole heart. The kiss they shared as husband and wife was witnessed by half the county and thoroughly approved of by all. The reception was held at the ranch, with tables of food, barrels of cider, and music that lasted until well past midnight. Martha danced with Jack, with Henry, with James, who had hobbled to the celebration on crutches, with strangers who wished them well. She laughed until her sides hurt and cried happy tears when Victoria gave a toast about unlikely friendships and second chances. As the celebration wound down and guests began departing, Victoria pulled Martha aside. "I am leaving tomorrow for New York," she said. "My train is at noon." "I am going to miss you," Martha said honestly. "And I you. But we will write and I will visit. You are stuck with me as a friend now. I can think of worse fates." They hugged tightly, two women who had started as rivals and become sisters of a sort. That night, Jack carried Martha over the threshold of their home, setting her down gently in the bedroom that was now theirs. Moonlight streamed through the window, casting everything in silver. "Hello, wife," Jack said softly. "Hello, husband," Martha replied, her heart full. Their wedding night was tender and sweet, a joining not just of bodies but of souls that had finally found their match. They learned each other slowly, with laughter and whispered endearments, building the foundation of the physical intimacy that would sustain their marriage. The next morning they saw Victoria off at the train station. She looked radiant in traveling clothes, her eyes bright with anticipation for the adventure ahead. "Be happy," Victoria told them both, "and name your first daughter after me." "What if it is a son?" Jack asked. "Then the second daughter." Victoria winked and boarded the train, waving from the window as it pulled away. Life on the Franklin ranch settled into a rhythm over the following months. Martha took over the household management and bookkeeping, implementing systems that increased efficiency and profitability. She also started a small vegetable garden that grew into a substantial operation, selling produce to independents. Jack expanded the cattle operation with Martha's input, and they became known for running one of the best ranches in the county. Eleanor Franklin stayed for 2 months before returning to Ohio, but her relationship with Jack was transformed. She wrote regularly, and they planned visits. She also developed genuine affection for Martha, whom she credited with bringing her son back to her. In the spring of 1879, Martha discovered she was pregnant. Jack was so overjoyed he picked her up and spun her around despite her laughing protests. They spent hours discussing names, planning for the baby, dreaming about the future. The baby arrived in November, a healthy boy with his father's dark hair and his mother's green eyes. They named him Robert Henry Franklin, after Jack's father and their dear friend Henry Cooper. Victoria sent an elaborate silver rattle from New York along with a letter describing her work with the Women's Club. She had become a force in the city's reform movement and was, by all accounts, thriving. She also mentioned she had met someone, a lawyer who worked on women's property rights cases, and things were developing nicely. 2 years later, Martha gave birth to a daughter they named Victoria Eleanor, honoring both the friend who had changed their lives and the mother-in-law who had forgiven them. The telegram they sent announcing the birth brought a response from Victoria that consisted of one word: perfect. James Garrett married a sweet schoolteacher from Kansas and brought her to meet the Franklins. There was no awkwardness, only genuine friendship, and the knowledge that everyone had ended up where they belonged. The ranch continued to prosper. Jack and Martha added acreage, built a larger barn, and became pillars of the Independence community. Martha started a lending library in town and pushed for better schools. Jack served on the town council and mentored young ranchers starting out. On their 5th wedding anniversary, they sat on the porch watching Robert chase chickens while baby Victoria napped in her cradle. The sunset painted the prairie in colors that still took Martha's breath away. "You ever think about how we started?" Jack asked, pulling Martha close. "Sometimes. It seems like a lifetime ago." "I was such a fool." "You were," Martha agreed cheerfully, "but you got better," Jack laughed. "Only because you refused to settle for less than I could be." "We made each other better," Martha corrected. "That is what love does." "I never thanked you properly," Jack said seriously, "for taking a chance on this place on me, for seeing past my mistakes to what we could build together." Martha kissed him softly. "I did not take a chance on you, Jack. I took a chance on myself, on believing I deserved real love and partnership. You just happened to be smart enough to recognize that and rise to meet it." "Still the most stubborn woman in Missouri," Jack teased. That is why you love me. One of many reasons, yes." They sat in comfortable silence as the sun sank lower, painting the sky in brilliant oranges and purples. Martha thought about the woman who had stepped off that train nearly 5 years ago, angry and humiliated and uncertain. She would barely recognize herself now. This life she had built was beyond anything she had imagined in those letters that had brought her west. Robert ran up to the porch, his face flushed with exertion. "Papa, can we go riding tomorrow? I want to check the north pasture like you did." "We can do that," Jack said, ruffling his son's hair. "Your mama can come too if she wants." "I want to," Robert insisted. "Mama should always come." Martha's heart swelled. "Then I will definitely be there." As Robert ran off to play again, Jack squeezed Martha's hand. "We did good, didn't we?" "We did better than good. We built something real and lasting. We found exactly what we were looking for, even if the path to get here was messy." "I love you, Martha Franklin, more every day." "And I love you, Jack Franklin, more than I knew was possible." The years continued to pass in contentment. They added 2 more children to their family, a second son named Thomas and another daughter called Sarah. The ranch grew to over 1,000 acres, employing a dozen hands and becoming one of the most successful operations in Missouri. Victoria visited every few years, bringing her lawyer husband and eventually their own children. The visits were highlights, filled with laughter and storytelling, reminiscing about the wild beginning that had led to such happiness for all involved. Eleanor Franklin moved to independence in her later years, wanting to be near her grandchildren. She lived in a cottage on the Franklin Ranch and became a beloved figure to the entire family, the grandmother who told stories of Ohio and taught the children card games and embroidery. James and his wife had a ranch full of horses and children of their own. The 2 families remained close, their children growing up together, the adults sitting on porches and sharing the comfortable friendship of those who had weathered life's complications and come through stronger. Martha never forgot those first uncertain weeks at the ranch when her future hung in the balance. In quiet moments, she sometimes thought about how different things could have turned out. If Jack had chosen Victoria, if she had accepted James's courtship, if she had given up and returned to Boston. Each alternate path led away from this life she cherished, and she was grateful every day that she had held out for real love instead of accepting convenience. On their 20th wedding anniversary, Jack gave Martha a leather-bound journal. "For your thoughts," he explained. "You have always been the writer between us. I thought maybe you would want to record some of our story." Martha opened the journal to find he had written on the first page in his careful script. The story of how Martha Daniels came west looking for a new life and found everything she never knew she needed. She spent the next year filling the journal with their history, from the scandalous beginning through all the years of joy and challenge. She wrote about Victoria and their unexpected friendship, about James and his kindness, about Eleanor's forgiveness. She wrote about each of their children, about the ranch, about the life they had carved from the wild Missouri prairie. When the journal was full, she started another, and then another. Her children would sometimes find her at her desk, pen moving across the page, a soft smile on her face. "What are you writing, Mama?" Sarah asked once. "Our story," Martha replied. "So you will always know where you came from and how much love went into making this family." As Martha moved into her later years, she and Jack became the couple that younger ranchers looked to for advice. They had weathered economic downturns, harsh winters, dry summers, and all the challenges that came with working the land. Through it all, their partnership had remained strong, built on genuine respect and deep love. Their children grew and started families of their own. Robert took over the ranch operation, bringing new ideas while respecting the foundation his parents had built. Victoria Eleanor became a teacher, inspired by her mother's passion for education. Thomas became a veterinarian, his love of animals nurtured from childhood. Sarah married a banker from Independence and became active in civic affairs, following in both her mother's and namesake Aunt Victoria's footsteps. Jack and Martha moved into the cottage Eleanor had lived in, leaving the main house to Robert and his growing family. They spent their days in quiet contentment, working in the garden, taking slow rides across the property, entertaining an endless stream of grandchildren. One evening in their 42nd year of marriage, they sat on the cottage porch watching the sunset, hands entwined as they had been for decades. "You remember the day we met?" Martha asked. "When both Victoria and I arrived on the same day," Jack chuckled. "How could I forget? I thought my life was ending. Turns out it was just beginning. I was so angry with you. You had every right to be. I was an idiot." "Yes, but you were my idiot," Martha said fondly, "and you worked very hard to make things right. Best decision I ever made was letting you make your own choice instead of trying to force one, even if it terrified me that you might choose James or choose to leave." "I almost did leave," Martha admitted. "That first week I packed my trunk twice, ready to get on the next train out. But something kept stopping me. Not you, at least not at first. It was this place, this land. It spoke to something in my soul. The land brought you here, but love made you stay." "Love made both of us what we needed to be," Martha corrected. "You became the man I needed, and I became the woman you needed. We grew into each other." Jack lifted her hand to his lips, kissing it gently. "I would do it all again, every mistake, every awkward moment, every bit of it, because it led here to this. To us, Jack agreed. They sat in peaceful silence as the stars began to appear, the prairie night settling around them with familiar sounds. Inside the main house, lights glowed warm, voices of their family carrying on the evening air. This was the legacy they had built together. Not just land and cattle and prosperity, but love that had multiplied across generations. Martha thought of the young woman who had stepped off that train so long ago, heart full of hope and fear in equal measure. She wished she could tell that younger self that everything would work out better than she could imagine. That the scandal and confusion would transform into the greatest love story of her life. That taking a chance on herself would lead to more happiness than she had ever dreamed possible. She thought of Victoria, who had written just last month about her grandchildren and her work, which continued even in her later years. Victoria had found her own happy ending, different from Martha's but equally fulfilling. Two women who had shown up to marry the same man, both finding exactly what they needed by refusing to settle for less than they deserved. "Thank you," Martha said softly. "For what?" Jack asked. "For being brave enough to let me choose. For working to deserve that choice. For 42 years of partnership and love. For everything." Jack pulled her closer, and Martha rested her head on his shoulder, fitting perfectly as she always had. "The choice was always yours," Jack said. "I just thank God every day that you chose me." As the night deepened and the stars wheeled overhead, they sat together in the life they had built, surrounded by the evidence of their love in every direction. The ranch that had started with one uncertain cowboy and his misguided letters had become a thriving legacy. The love that had emerged from scandal and confusion had become the bedrock of a family that would carry forward for generations. Martha closed her eyes, content in a way she had never imagined possible in those early Boston days. She had come west looking for escape and found purpose. She had agreed to meet a man and found her soulmate. She had taken a chance on an uncertain future and created a beautiful life. The cowboy had chosen the one nobody expected, because in the end, it had not been his choice at all. Martha had chosen herself, chosen her own worth, chosen to wait for real love. And Jack had been wise enough to recognize that and become worthy of that choice. As they finally rose and went inside, walking hand in hand through the door of their cottage, Martha looked back once at the vast prairie stretching endlessly under the stars. This wild, beautiful land had tested her, shaped her, and ultimately embraced her as one of its own. She had come here as Martha Daniels, uncertain and searching. She had become Martha Franklin, beloved and complete. And the story that had started with such chaos had become the greatest romance she could have ever imagined, written not in letters but in a life fully and joyfully lived. The end.